There he is. He'll be right back because he's got to unplug something. Okay, so we've got a few things. Welcome to Talking Niagara this morning with myself, Peter Giblett, and when he gets back from unplugging the world, that will be Dave Wheeler. Where are you, Dave?
I'm coming. I was right.
What?
I had left it plugged in, which would have ruined the coffee. It would have cooked. So, anyway, just as I predicted yesterday, Trump won the election.
Yeah.
Well,
there we go. Trump wins, but that's we can spend a certain amount of time talking about that. Current state of the parties is 277 for Trump and 224 for Harris.
I think it's going to be at least.
Philadelphia went both ways during. Was light blue, was light red, light blue, light red, light blue, light red, light blue the whole night.
Yeah.
And it was clear that Philadelphia was probably the one that was going to make the main difference. So in that whole election, because places like the places that we expected to go to the Dems went to the Dems. All of the swing states essentially Michigan hasn't declared yet, but all of the swing states have gone to Trump.
Yeah, he could get at least 286. That was the prediction.
Well, Arizona and Nevada are still to declare. Michigan's still to declare. Alaska's still to declare, and all of those states are actually swinging in his favor at the moment.
He could actually get over 300 electoral seats.
Maine is still to declare, but that's likely to go Harris.
Well, Maine has a divided electoral.
Maine has got one Harris, one Trump. Yeah.
And Illinois would probably have, depending on what the vote was like in Illinois, they have a much more democratic system. They divide the vote up compared to how the people have voted. And so if like I said before, if one of the states had 4 electoral votes and Harris got 25, you have to get at least 25% of the vote to get an electoral college vote, and the other 3 would go to somebody who got over 70%. So that's how they do it there. I think that's a much fairer system. Right now, the electoral college really doesn't represent democracy as well as it should.
I actually think that the electoral college is well past its deadline and needs to be gone because in that respect, though, currently it's sitting at 71 million versus 66 million. Trump would wins the popular vote as well.
Is that out there yet? Has he won the popular vote?
Well, he's not outright won, but there was basically, as we sit right now, there are 71,139,000 votes for Donald Trump and 66,204 votes for 204,000 votes for Harris.
Well, that's something I didn't expect. I thought the Democrats, because they tend to come out and more in elections, so I expected.
Yeah, we probably got
the popular vote to go to Harris, but didn't really know which way the election was going to go. But if Trump got more of the popular vote, look, what's happened here is really kind of unprecedented in a way. It's beyond expectations. Trump will get in. He will be a decisive winner of the election. And Harris has conceded this. She's phoned Trump and conceded the election.
Of course.
But what is?
Of course you would.
Yes.
That's what you do. That's what you do at a certain point. That's what that's what that's what you do when you know that the gig is up.
But what is much more consequential is that the Congress and the Senate for sure is in the hands
Absolutely, every one of them.
of the Republicans, and it looks as if the Congress will go their way too.
Well,
there is nothing in the path of Donald Trump right now. If what looks to be the Congress will go into the Republican hands, then all three of those executive areas of all those power bases will be in the hands of Republicans.
Yeah, as we stand right now, the Senate's at 52 Republicans. So whilst it isn't all declared, it's once you've got 50, you've got a majority, right?
Yeah,
so
especially
so they get what they want through the Senate. The U.S. House is currently at 198 Republican versus 180. It's not declared, but it's heading that way.
Yeah, and as far as the Senate, it's sewn up because Vance will be the deciding vote, even if it tightens up a little bit. So he's got the Senate. It looks like he's got the Congress. He's got all, and he's already stacked the judiciary in the Supreme Court. It's a conservative judiciary. This is a very, very clear sense of what's happening in Western democracies. There is a shift towards the right. There is a decisive shift towards the right. The Democrats in the United States and the liberals up here have lost touch with the average person, and as a result of reaping the consequences of that.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting yesterday watching all the different pundits do their thing and how many people were saying who is going to win and who is going to not win. After the show yesterday, I picked up a video on YouTube that was a bookies was reporting on what the bookies saw, and they definitely gave, and it came right out that Trump was going to win because the bookies had analyzed everything and figured he had over a 60% chance of winning over Kamala Harris. So I figure, the bookies, they don't want to lose any money.
Everything here really is the whole election. The way I look at it is a month ago, Harris was comfortably in the lead. No, about a month ago, she was about 4 points in the lead, and she's been slipping ever since.
Yeah, and it's still, the polls have not done us much service because the polls were predicting a close race, and it wasn't close. And it was it is a decisive victory for Trump. It is a decisive victory for the Republicans across the board.
Yeah.
And the polls did not serve us well. Again, I thought they would have corrected, and they kept saying, "Oh, well, we corrected for the past 2016 and 2020." But I have to hand it to my one of the guys I love to watch is a guy by the name of John Mersheimer. He's a political realist, and he predicted that Trump will win because many of the Republicans in the academia, whereas it's normally thought would be the strength for the Democrats, many of the people in academia wouldn't say or declare who they were going to vote for, but he felt that they were going to vote for Trump, and that's why he said Trump was going to win. Lichtman got destroyed here. Alan Lichtman got absolutely wiped out. His 13 keys meant nothing. It just got wiped right off the map. And the economists we were talking about yesterday. Go ahead.
But Lichtman was actually talking about a lot of uncertainty. Yeah, I know that he pushed his flag in one direction at the end, but it was only last minute did he actually make a prediction.
No, he made the prediction long ago. He made the prediction a couple of months ago using his 13 keys. But but later on, and he's been pretty accurate for most of the past elections. But when this did start, he did say there was a kind of a difference being Harris was not elected; she was kind of like appointed, and that was a new sort of feature that he didn't count on in other times. And also, when I listened to him, he had a deliberate bias. Unfortunately, when he was talking about his 13 keys, later on, when I heard him talking, he himself had developed a bias because he had been threatened. He had been threatened by Trump supporters during the last election, and his family had been threatened. So I figure that might have put a bias into him.
Yeah, I think he had a bias, that's for sure. Okay, the other election, in not that this really matters because they never seem to vote. They never vote together on much anyway. There's 27 governors, Republican governors versus 23 Democrat governors right now, and only a small number of those got elected last night anyway.
Yeah. So this is
okay. So
I'm trying to put a positive spin on this. Like my biggest angst, probably the only reason why I wanted Harris to win over Trump, basically, was I'm afraid that Trump will tariff the crap out of us as he said he would.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
If he holds to the NAFTA agreement that he himself has done, we should be okay. But remember, the tariffs he put on us the first time didn't come off under the Democrats.
Yeah. And, okay. So here's a few comments from our listeners, right? So Mike is saying Canada's in trouble. We're totally screwed now. The country has to totally change, or we will be left in the dust. I get it. The next 4 years will be a horror story for Canada. That's all I care about, right? And Randy, I believe polls are a pile of political crap. Yes, I do. I used to try to steer public opinion by suggesting who's to do what, and I'm considered correct 4 times out of 5. A few times here and there. Yeah, absolutely. This whole question, I was nervous this whole election. I wouldn't put it down on either side. I had feelings that Trump was going to actually take this on, and that I actually thought he might actually win bigger than he did. Actually, the funny thing is the size of the result, as you said, he might get more than 300. The size of the result is kind of odd because, in fact, most of these results are pretty damn close in each of the elections anyway. But because states go one way or the other, they flip flop. With 100% of the votes, that's what, of course, means the major difference, right? Angela's saying she doesn't look forward to the next 4 years. Betty Zoom is saying GM seems, Trump has won, wondering what will happen now. Nanos polls are totally corrupt, says Mike, and it's the lead in drinking. It's the lead in the drinking water to the US. Hate wins.
There's a general shift towards the right overall, and as far as Democrats or even the liberals up here, we are poised here to see a complete overtake of a federal government by the conservatives. By all predictions here, our polls, no matter how bad they are up here, because they are so skewed towards the conservatives, it's hard to ignore them. So we will most likely get a conservative government, and the one in the States, and we find this going on all over Europe too. What has happened is the progressives, the Democrats, and the liberals have all lost the confidence of the average person. In an amazing shift in demographics, the average working guy is sees the Republicans as representing them. That is a change over 100 years. And Democratic representatives were usually thought to be the people who represented.
And again, some of that is the same as what we're seeing here in Canada. The elitism that you're getting with the Liberals, the elitism that you get with the Democrats.
Yeah, and I try to say it. I try to say this to my American buddy of mine when I kept saying, like, look, he was astounded that, you know, Trump and the Republicans were doing as well as they were, and I said because the Democrats have lost their ears for the ordinary working class. They just say, we know what's good for you. This is what you're going to do. Yeah. We know what's good for you. We know what's good for you. That kind of thing, that kind of attitude. And when you get that kind of elitist overbearing, we know what's good for you. We're going to do what's good for you. We don't really care what's happening. We don't care that your job is being lost because, you know, it's good for the climate that you're not drilling for oil right now. So, well, your job's lost, but it's better for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
all right. Angela's coming back with, where conservatives have won in Europe, many human rights have been reversed.
Yeah, that's the rub. That's the rub. But we're in now, so we're just going to have to coast through. And next year we're going to have a conservative government here, and we're just going to have to deal what we have to deal with, and we have to find out where it went wrong with the liberals and progressives. Well, they have to, not us, but the liberals, the Democrats, and the progressives going to have to figure out where they went wrong, desperately wrong.
But again, as we always know, that there are flipovers in every situation. Right. So, Randy, Trump is an opportunity. Trump, complete with all levels of lawmaking support, has the ability to drive country's economy forward for the people, or negatively to steal out of the coffers of private interest. Everyone is afraid of Trump because he's a me type of character.
Say what you want about Trump, but the guy is brilliant. And I attribute a large part of his success is how he gets into the news all the time, every time. Every bit of negativity that the left press wants to throw on him or the right. He makes money for the networks because he is news. He brings in viewers. And the left-leaning press cannot resist him. And they put him all over his paper. And when he does something like go to McDonald's, they talk about like it is some sort of horrible thing he's doing. And yet it's just a stint. It's just
advertising. You know, he looks at it as just advertising for him. In reality, the last 4 years, there hasn't been a day when Trump hasn't been in the papers.
Exactly. And that is his genius.
Yeah, exactly.
He can get, and as a matter of fact, it was attributed in 2016, the left press even admitted that they were the ones that helped launch his success because they couldn't shut up about him, but they never learned their lesson. Yeah. And when they do things like when they do things like overstating the fact that he went to McDonald's and talk about how terrible it was, all it was him going to McDonald's, and they could have put it in one line and that's it and forgot about it and start talking about
they could have ignored it. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay. Angela is saying, I think people are pretty dumb to actually want to sabotage themselves. And she also is saying, then again, Hitler got elected as well.
Yeah, he got elected, but he was appointed chancellor. So when he didn't have a majority in the Reichstag, his party. But when it came time when there was social problems, they thought that if they put him in as chancellor, they could control him. Once they did that, and he did not have a majority. As a matter of fact, if it went to another election, he probably would have lost a lot of the seats he already had. So that problem there is once they appointed him chancellor, then he took away all democratic rights. And of course, that's what people are fearing about Trump. He now that he is in absolute power, particularly with the Senate and the Congress, he could do some damage, according to the progressives. We'll see if that actually happens, though. I think he's the best bet to stop the wars, no matter how much you might not like him. He's a better bet for stopping the Ukraine war and the Gaza war, in my view.
I'm hoping that turns out to be the truth. I doubt it though somehow. Okay, Randy is saying
definition of. Okay, go ahead.
Randy is saying define brilliance from 3 bankruptcies and bailouts to from others. Are you saying that he makes his money by losing first in order to build new?
No, I'm saying he's brilliant on how he manipulates the media.
Yeah,
he's absolutely brilliant.
How he manipulates the media. Yeah, absolutely he is. And as I say, even during 4 years of Democrat leadership, there has not been, there's not been any, 4 years of Democrat leadership that he wasn't out the papers one day at all, right?
Well, he started getting to the back pages of the news in around 2021, but I think it was. But then when CNN had that town hall, it launched him right back into the front of the papers again. The town hall with him.
Okay.
So I said before, the press can't resist him because it means revenue for the paper.
Yeah. All right. Gary's saying, congratulations, Wills, we got him in, right? Right. And Angela's saying he won't stop the wars other than sacrifice people.
You know what? The Harris, the Biden-Harris government has looked extremely weak on the Ukraine and Gaza war. They're extraordinarily weak. They've turned their back on the civilians of Gaza and let that atrocity keep continuing. Trump can't do any worse than they have done.
Well, I was looking yesterday. Somebody was pointing out to me yesterday about Kamala Harris being married to a Jewish man, and nothing wrong with that, of course. But then it kind of became clear to me as her acquiescence to Israel through the whole Israel-Gaza situation. We were also talking about what is the counts of the dead in Gaza, and I think the estimates have been 400,000, 500,000 at least now, but they're estimates, unlike the figures that were put out by the Hamas ministry.
It wouldn't be surprising if the death toll is 100,000 plus. As a matter of fact, some other estimates have said it could be more like 140,000. The Gaza ministries can no longer keep track because they're blown to smithereens. They don't have the means of record keeping. We have to rely on Doctors Without Borders and UNRWA and the other nonprofits in there to help us along with that.
But it's going to be the potential is there that we end up with the Gaza population gone in a couple of years. If they can,
well, that's what they want to do, and they're already planning settler movements in there. So they're going to cut the Gaza Strip into 3 or 5 pieces, and administer them from zones that cut across the Gaza Strip, so that they are separating the Gaza Strip into 3. Some say 5 zones, 3 for sure, possibly 5, where they can constrict the people in Gaza even more. Their objective, of course, is to make them so miserable that they can't live. The settlers have attacked in the West Bank as well, and it's probably not even hardly on the news. They went and they burned 20 cars in a city. They've attacked people. They've burned down olive trees and all of that. And the Israeli government will not do anything about it, because when they send their police or soldiers to arrest these people, other police and soldiers attack the police and soldiers.
Yeah.
The Israeli government has no credibility on this at all, and the U.S. government has absolutely no credibility either, because they keep turning their back. They can say all they want. Oh, we got to have a Palestinian state, but they've said that for years and years. And there's a 700,000 settlers in the West Bank now, and there are settlers trying to get into Gaza as we speak.
And arguably, the lack of a backbone in the Biden U.S. government has actually caused Trump to win.
Yeah, that was one of the things I think probably turned it against Harris, was the Gaza war.
Yeah,
she lost the Arab vote in Michigan. That could have made it. I don't think it made that much of a difference, but the idea that the Harris-Biden government could not just said nice things or put red lines out there, but didn't stop anything, and they let the Ukraine war get out of control. Right now, it's just growing and growing and growing. So then the Biden administration seemed to have invested in another couple of forever wars.
Yeah,
and I think that the Americans don't like that.
No, and exactly, as soon
on
as
either side of the aisle.
Yeah, exactly. And it's particularly when the body bags start coming back. And Michigan, where there's a lot of questions over Islamic vote, Trump is leading by 100,000.
There you go. See, they don't trust Biden and they don't trust Harris. They always say they're going to fix it and they're going to ask for a ceasefire, but they haven't done it. Month after month after month. So we're almost there. We're almost there. And then anytime Netanyahu changes the rules, oh, well, we'll have to work with that. But if Hamas says we're not going to negotiate because Israel's just going to change the rules again, and then they say, well, it's Hamas's problem. So it's very unfair all in all. But
all right, we got an important...
The only thing I can hope for here is Trump does have a better idea on how to stop these wars, particularly the Gaza one. And I don't know if he can or not, but obviously Biden and Harris couldn't, and Harris wouldn't afterwards either.
Yeah. Okay, so moving back locally, there's been various accusations around Brampton's violent temple clashes. We didn't get to this story yesterday. 3 men were charged after protests outside Hindu temples and Sikh Gurdwara. And further, now Polyev is waving in, accusing Trudeau of sowing divisions because of what's gone on in Brampton.
Yes. This is what sort of precipitated this was a visit of diplomats to the temple. This is a typical thing they do, though. This is something that the Indian government has done for many years, has gone to the temples and try to connect the people with government agencies in India, something like to do with senior pensions, how to get visas to go back and forth, how to facilitate their diaspora, basically. But the Khalistanis feel that, or not the Khalistanis, but the Sikhs, particularly those who want a Khalistani independent country, they feel that this is part of what India does to collect information on them. This all happened in and around Diwali, basically. And what you don't see in the newspapers is a Sikh terrorist warned the Hindus not to go to their temple and celebrate Diwali because there was going to be problems. And one thing that's never really uttered much here is that we have a Sikh terrorists in Canada and the United States. The Sikh diaspora in Canada is one of the largest. In here, the efforts to get a Khalistani state are much more pronounced than it is in India, if we were to believe what the newspapers say. Now, most of the Sikhs, of course, probably just want a Khalistani state and are not violent. But there is an element of terrorism in the Sikh community that we don't often hear about. And that probably is the thing that upsets India the most. India has accused Canada of supporting Khalistani separatist movements. I'm not so sure that is.
No, I don't think that is true.
No.
Not the state. Maybe people within this, maybe individuals in Canada may support that, but then that may well be true in places like Britain. That may well be true in other places as well.
Yes, and so the diaspora, the Sikh diaspora, apparently has much stronger movements towards an independent state. Now, this could be because those efforts in India are underground. In India itself, they may have had to have gone underground, so they're not evidently on the surface to be seen.
The question about an independent Punjab is a question that raises its head and then disappears. And of course, the question realistically is one of there's many parts of the Punjab that a Sikh Punjab would encompass would actually be in Pakistan as well, not just in India.
Yeah, well, you're not going to get that far in that area because the Sikhs of Pakistan have largely left Pakistan long ago.
Yeah, but there are holy sites many holy sites in Pakistan.
Yeah, but short of getting a big army and taking it back, which isn't going to happen.
And I think they know that. They know that as well. Yeah,
Now, just as an aside, Diwali. Now, I just thought this was a Hindu celebration that also Sikhs celebrated. It's the Festival of Light, and but I was surprised to know that Jains and Buddhists also celebrated.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, although it's called the Festival of Light, and for each of the Hindus, Jains, Sikhs, and newer Buddhists have a little bit different take on it. For instance, the Jains feel that their last prophet, I guess, is celebrates the time in which he achieved nirvana, and that's why they celebrate it. But it doesn't mean that to the other groups, but they all celebrate it.
Yeah. Well, interesting thing here is that I have to ask a question, and trying to get away from the problems that have occurred in Brampton, and let's put them as being, I'm hoping, isolated incidents. I have a question for you. It's like, and we have our Festival of Lights here in Niagara Falls. They've not opened yet, and they tend not to open until closer to, until later in November, as we get closer to Christmas. Wouldn't it be a wonderful thing, given that Diwali is actually at this time of, in late October, early November, every year? Wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if we started the Festival of Lights in Niagara at the eve of Diwali?
No, because the Sikhs and Hindus would come out and have a punch fest.
Well, yeah.
Okay. Maybe we can give it to maybe we can get the Jains and the Buddhists to stop it. They're a lot less likely to do a punch up. But this is something that I would like to point out, and I made this point over and over and over again. We have the diversity, equity, and inclusion agencies here in Niagara, and yet they completely ignore the imported prejudices that we find these days. Here is a clear rupture between two communities in Canada. They are prejudiced against each other. They carry long ethnic dislike for one another, religious dislike, and nationalist dislike, and they continue to do that here in Canada without much protest. Now, if somebody here were, if a Muslim came into the country and we showed disdain for them, and a bunch of Christians went out and started beating the Muslims, there wouldn't be, it would be shocking to us. It would be dumb, and we would put an end to it and try to resolve the prejudice between the two. But here you have Sikhs and Hindus duking it out and bringing their prejudices with them and acting on those prejudices. How does the diversity, equity, and inclusion group here deal with such a thing? They don't even look that way.
Okay, Randy West basically says, as for Brampton, what exists has been brought here from their homelands and represents what they used to be. This is Canada. Brampton must become a part of Canada, and Canadian Ways or Brampton will be setting themselves up as illegal.
Yeah, and that's, I think, pretty much what I had just said. There's this, they import their prejudice, but we find this between Serbs and Croatians. We find it between the Irish, the Northern Irish. They bring their prejudices with them sometimes. We find that this is the case when in India, just the Indian groups themselves, they still have the caste system in their culture. It may not be in the government, but they still apply that. And we find that Indians of lower castes basically find it hard to move up in companies that they are employed with other Indians. So these are, of course, these customs are going to come with anyone that comes into the country, and there are dislikes for one another. I mean, there's huge dislikes between Poles and Lithuanians, for example, that we don't really hear much about. That kind of thing. So people bring their prejudice and their hatreds with them as long. And how do we then face up to that? And so far, it hasn't got so far out of hand, but it could. And that's what I'm afraid of. I don't think we were prepared for that. We are looking at our own prejudice: Black against white, Catholic against Protestant, Jew against Gentile, that kind of thing. Those sort of prejudices that we are familiar with from our own culture, but we are not familiar with the cultures of other places. And when they bring their prejudices into our country, I don't know how, if we have the means to deal with them that well.
Yeah. And that's part of the, okay, so Randy's saying, yeah, the last time you had Irish clash, when was the last time you had an Irish clash in public? Yeah, that's for sure.
There's not but I remember about 10 years ago talking to some young men who were born here, but were of Irish descent. And they were part of clubs and organizations that were in favor of violence over their others in Ireland, which was shocking to me. And I talked to others that shared the same opinions, and I was shocked that the prejudices that were in Ireland came to Canada, and young men that were born in Canada carried on those bigotries, and and felt that violence was okay to bring about the resolve that they would wish. So yeah, they're not fighting in the streets maybe, but there's still an undercurrent of it there.
Yeah. Okay. I've been putting up a few of the comments. Don't know that there's anything we need to comment upon. with
What was
those.
the trucker strike one?
The trucker strike proved we are not prepared to deal with and negotiate with large numbers of folk who can't agree, yet we must share space. I'm presuming he's meaning the convoy.
Yeah, the convoy.
Yeah.
And the government was completely unprepared for that. Remember what the government kept saying? They kept saying this is a fringe group. They're misogynists, they're racist, they're all that. And yet the the indigenous people were the ones that brought the convoy in. They let it in. And during the convoy and anytime they talked to people, they were of every race there was. And talked about six, they had a food tent set up there to feed the protesters.
Yeah.
So the government itself, the comments by the leading government officials at the time were completely off base. And when they called them fringe elements.
Absolutely, they were. Yeah. And that's another reason why I think we are where we are today with Mr. Trudeau trailing in the polls.
Yes, it's the disconnect. I think the same thing is happening in the United States. It's the disconnect with the average person.
Yeah,
that elitist attitude. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that was something I was really proud to be Canadian then, and now I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think the bones of Canadians, our good sense will prevail. Our tolerance is bar none as far as accepting new Canadians and accepting religions and all that and different people. We're way up there compared to other countries, basically. However, I don't know how much our tolerance will carry on when we're going to get about 1 million refugees now that Trump has won. He wants to get rid of 11 million refugees out of the country quick. And I think, 10% of them will try to crash our border for sure. So I don't know how long our tolerance.
Angela Brown makes the point that trucker convoy is only an example of how selfish many people are becoming. If we were to organize the same extent for the homeless, maybe something might get done instead of something silly that doesn't impact us today.
If we took our science, the money we give to NASA and turned it into the homeless, we could do something too. So you can make that argument about everything. We can stop making that museum and give the money to the homeless. We can stop anything. We could stop our Olympic program and give the money to the homeless and try to fix it that way. I don't see the trucker thing as that selfish. I think there are elements of that trucker convoy that were honest protesters. Other elements were just
but again, I think why Angela says it was selfish is that you can have a demonstration. A demonstration is one weekend in Ottawa, go home, right? Going beyond that is selfish.
I don't know. Right? It was imposition on and it was a complete mess up too, because the truckers were supposed to park outside the city and walk in and establish themselves there.
Yeah.
But let's face it, there were multiple different amounts of people that joined this. They joined and they came into the city, and there were a variety of different reasons why they were there. But when the press went around and talked to people honestly, one after the other, I didn't find too many of them being they were protesting some things. I don't think they were protesting well. I don't think they were like vaccinations or something like that, but other people were there to protest other things. And some people did come on the weekends and leave, so yeah, I just the fact that it was supported by half of Canadians, according to polls, is something that we really have to look at. Where are we going wrong?
Okay, so Betty is saying Angela made a good point, and I think they need to be covered also. Randy is basically saying there is no possible answer to the homeless problem, right? Angela came back and said, I found our society has become less tolerant. People are only happy if their leaders hurt other people, when in fact it may be many of the supporters themselves who get hurt. And further, says that they are able to take 3 weeks with no work, so they obviously were not hurting financially. That she's back at the truckers, of course.
Well, the people came and went. Those people who could stay there did, and they were being financed. Remember that there were people helping them financially. So there were people that went there for the weekends. We know Sukote, right? We knew we had her on our show talking about her experiences there.
Yeah.
There was no evidence of violence. There was no evidence of, she saw no evidence of violence. She saw no evidence of racialism or racism or anything of that kind. Those kind of negative things that the government suggested were happening. No sign of misogyny, no sign of racism,
and she also said that the pictures that they took of the Nazi flags there was one, maybe two, maybe less than a dozen Nazi flags across the whole demonstration. A small group that was showing that.
Yeah, a small group, and one guy with, you see, in a protest like this, you get the nuts. Look what happened in the Floyd protests in the South.
Anyway,
south of us. They ended up doing $2.5 billion worth of damage, and it's supposed to be a mostly peaceful protest,
Okay, so Angela continues on. People helping them finance work from the U.S. interests, etc. Betty is saying we could go do a GoFundMe thingy for the homeless. Need land to put small homes on wheels. Dan would make them for us. Okay. The one thing you had to show is only one person who attended. I also know a lot of people who were there who said there was a lot of problems. Yeah.
Well, I also talked to the people that were in Ottawa, that lived in Ottawa, and they found it a complete pain in the neck. It was an imposition on them. They felt that the truckers were selfish for imposing themselves on the Ottawa people. I think they would have been much more tolerant if it had gone as planned, where most of the trucks were supposed to be parked outside of Ottawa and the people were supposed to walk in. But that got screwed up because of the Ottawa police didn't enforce that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of factors involved here. But the thing is, I don't think we're in that much trouble. I think we're going to have to live with the reality south of our border. But I don't think we're in a whole lot of trouble here in Canada. We are definitely going to get a conservative government next time, and we're just going to have to live with that. I just hope that I see it as a cycle of life, basically. You go conservative, you go liberal, back and forth.
It is. You do. Yeah. Okay. So should have invited some people who lived in Ottawa. She was talking to your comment earlier on. Karen is saying, I hope our federal and provincial immigration departments stick to their proposed cutbacks. Angela was saying Ottawa police were feeding them coffee, etc. And Chris makes the point, truckers truck. Yeah. If Angela's saying, if I organized a protest for the homeless, we'd all be arrested and thrown in jail.
As you should be, you radical. Feed the poor, sustain the needy, you radical. Into jail.
The point of the convoy was to force a sit-down discussion on the subjects of how the truckers and others as a whole were being cornered and jailed during COVID.
Yeah,
and
but
Betty comes back with honk honk. Thank you, Betty.
But it turned out that a lot of people went to the Ottawa protests for reasons other than the vaccinations. There were people there that I had to had to say Global did a great job. They walked around with a camera and they put it on YouTube, and they just went around and talked to people for over an hour, maybe even longer than that. And they just picked out people here and there. And some people says, well, yeah, I believe in the vaccinations, but I don't believe the laws that force people to have vaccinations, blah, blah, blah. There's all kinds of different attitudes there. Other people were there because they felt the standard of living was being reduced and the government. And as far as Karen Fraser goes, she's hoping that the cutbacks for immigration are sustained. Well, they shouldn't have been that high in the first place, as it turns out, because we had no ability to sustain that level of immigration.
Yeah, exactly. We had no ability to sustain that level of people coming in. And that's not to say that we're opposed to people coming in. We're not. You know, I think everybody here in this program who's listening and commenting upon that has never been opposed to immigration, you know, but it's basically
the only ones I don't want coming into the country are from Britain.
It was the levels of immigration that was the question, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So seems that there was more than we know, but that's what we want. That's who wants that news. Yeah. Okay. I don't know whether we covered this one yesterday about the Indigenous leader John Norton, the statue in Niagara Parks for this one.
Yeah, John Norton. I thought I knew who John Norton was, but I was wrong. I thought he was an Indigenous leader that led some of the 5 nations or 6 nations against the American incursion in the War of 1812, when the Americans tried to invade and take Canada. He's more than I thought. His father was Scottish, and his mother, I forget, I think she was Shawnee maybe, or a Cherokee. Well, talk about if you want a super warrior, you couldn't have done any better. Add Scottish genes to Cherokee genes. Look out. Well, he was that, and he came up here and he worked with John Brant of the Mohawk. Yeah. What?
And Isaac Brock.
And Isaac Brock. And during the battle, and the reason why this has come up is because on October 12th, I think it was the Battle of Queenston Heights, where the Canadian militias, the Indigenous forces, and the British Army at the time turned back a huge invasion from the United States. And what looked to be a bad situation where the Americans could get a permanent foothold, it was turned back largely by the efforts of the Indigenous people who harried the American troops enough to make it long enough in order for the British to launch a counterattack a little later on, which caused the capture of 1,000 American troops. Also, the Indigenous people prevented the New York militia from coming over. It scared the death of the New York militia. They weren't going to cross if they thought they were going to go into a buzzsaw of Indigenous warriors. So John Norton is being celebrated. Now, he's a mixed race guy who adapted the Indigenous ways and became a crucial war leader. And I think the credit where credit is due. I think this is long overdue. I think we should learn a little bit more about our history for sure. Because I thought John Norton was just an Indigenous person with an Anglified name. That's not the truth, though.
Yeah, his Mohawk name is Tayonin Ho-Karawaran.
You didn't pronounce that right.
I probably didn't. I've been practicing that for a day, and you went and killed me right there and then.
I didn't even attempt it.
But I gave it a good shot, and you know, I'm pretty good at dealing with names. I've had some people with odd names coming into the office, and I try to tackle the names, and I get, you know, I've never been accused of being violently wrong. People appreciate the fact that I try. even if I get it wrong, you know.
Well, I'm glad you did it, not me.
But
I might be still trying to untie my tongue if I tried it.
yeah, he was in the same. He died at the same time almost as Major General Isaac Brock, who was killed in storming Queenston Heights to remove American forces. It wasn't the same battle, but it was at the same. It was literally within days.
Well, so there's a Canadian hero, basically, who helped Canada maintain itself. We would have been overrun by the Americans for sure, but it took amazing men, Tecumseh, John Norton, John Brant, Isaac Brock. These fellas, very early on in the war, made the difference because the Americans had the momentum. They had larger numbers of troops. They had more resources. They had everything. As Britain was tied up in a life and death struggle in the Napoleonic Wars, where almost all their resources were devoted to the Napoleonic Wars. It was a good chance for the Americans to take Canada. As far as Thomas Jefferson said, all we have to do really is walk up there and it's ours. And it didn't turn out that way. They got quite a bit of resistance, and that's
and
thanks to guys like
face.
Tecumseh and John Norton.
And they got a bloodied face in certain parts as well.
Yeah, they certainly did. The 1812 war was one of these senseless conflicts that went back and forth. They won one, we won one, they won one, they won one. Well, they burned down New York, we burned down Washington, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. There were a number of cities that were left burning after battles surrounding those cities. Places like Detroit, places like Buffalo, as you said, the burning of the White House there. All of these were parts and parcel of that war. And the war dragged on for quite a long time. And you say, I never knew anything about this war. Of course, the other war that was going on exactly the same time, which took a lot of British forces, was, of course, the Napoleonic War. And I was good at history, and I knew a lot of British history. I didn't know about the War of 1812.
Yeah, right? It's a forgotten war. Not to Canadians, exactly. But it is
not to Canadians, no, but to British, and I guess to some extent to the Americans. It's a forgotten war.
The Americans did not kind of lost that war, so they don't like to really. The only thing they focus on that war is basically the Battle of New Orleans, which was a decisive victory for them over the British. But the war was already over, so it was a meaningless battle. Tragically, those men need not have died because nothing would have changed if they had won or not won. And he says. What was that by Betty Zoom?
She said, I went up that staircase. My legs felt like rubber coming down.
Oh, the monument? Yes.
Yeah.
I remember that too.
I daren't have tackled that because my knees would not let me.
And here's a bit of history that everybody forgets too. Well, we talked about the tragedy of the
sarcasm. What? Angela's sarcasm here.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. They invaded Canada and then left of their own accord. And we won the war, but we're not going to stay. We're leaving.
Well, apparently she's saying when she lived in the US in school, we were taught that the US won that war.
That's what Americans do.
It was a negotiated it was a negotiated settlement. Let's leave it there.
Yeah. Well,
right.
Just like that for the Canadian side. Hello. I was going to say that the 1812 war, the fact that we won on the Canadian side, basically, we ejected the invaders, so to speak, but it the western part, the Niagara Peninsula was a very, very prosperous area before the war. It was extremely prosperous and had a whole lot of promise. But after the war, it took a whole generation to rebuild it back up. So there was lots of problems that faced the settlers after that. It cost them 30 years of development because the Americans had so thoroughly destroyed so much of Ontario. It took them a very, very long time to rebuild it. If that war hadn't happened, it would have been a much more prosperous, faster.
Yeah.
And Betty Zooms, thanks for the day, fellows. Have a great day. Hugs from St. Catharines. Here's a hug for you too, Betty.
Yeah, we love our St. Catharines listeners.
Yes.
Okay.
Our listeners.
We love all of our listeners. Okay. So we didn't get on to another story, but we'll start there tomorrow about the oil and gas lobby and their allegations that the emissions cap can cost the sector lots of money.
Very controversial, but I don't think it'll add up to much because, like I said before, it's likely the Conservatives will win the next election and negate anything that the Liberals have done or will try to do. The Americans considered it a war of independence, and that was what they won. Yeah, but I would add too that one of the best history books I've ever read was called The Civil War of 1812. In other words, it made it as if it was a continuation of the Revolutionary War. It was actually because all the loyalists were from the United States anyway, and it looked like it was a continuation of the rivalries between the American independents and those who were loyalists.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, except for many different actors, of course, because time had moved on.
Yes, indeed. There's a lot of really good stories about the War of 1812.
It's interesting. It's probably one of I've seen so many books about it. I'm fascinated by how many books there were about it. And as I said, when I came to Canada, I knew nothing about this war. One of the first things I went up to Lundy's Lane, and Lundy's Lane at the time when I came here was nothing like it is right now with that sign across the top of Lundy's Lane, Drummond Hill. And I looked at that, and it was only afterwards that I learned about that war. As I say, we'd never heard a thing about it.
Yeah, see, unfortunately, it made the hugest difference here. If not for the resistance that was put up, Canada would have been absorbed quickly into the United States. There would be nothing to resist it. The Brits had limited resources to battle back that army. Luckily for us, their army wasn't well organized, and they thought it was just a matter of coming up and taking over. And until they got the idea that they better get a well-organized army and train them, and that showed up at the Battle of Chippewa, and that really put the shivers through everybody's backbone, because now they had an army that was
their first incursion with a professional army. Yeah, absolutely. All right, and of course, the British already had professional armies at that point.
Yeah, that's why a small group of American or British regulars could turn back a large number of militiamen because of their training and their ability to put out a whole lot of lead very quickly and to be able to charge in coordination. That was the biggest advantage. That's why a small number of British regulars could take on larger numbers. But when the Americans started training their army, things had changed.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so we'll be back here tomorrow with a question about the oil and gas lobby, and we'll discuss that tomorrow.
Yes, indeed. Without further ado, I bid you adieu. Peace.